Hello, Chill Computer Guy. Today we're in Bitwig 2.4. I felt the need to do a quick addendum on the multi-sampler here. First off, one of the things that I didn't really cover is something that I have found to be a fact, is you can only play 8 samples simultaneously. I have not found any way to play more than 8 samples simultaneously. Now, if anybody has found out a way to do that, please comment down below. Let me know. But I've messed with the voicing and everything else, but for some reason I cannot get more than 8 samples to play simultaneously. Now you're thinking, why would you want to play 8 samples simultaneously? Well, you really wouldn't want to anyway. I mean, why would you want 8 sounds to play simultaneously? As far as layering goes, I guess you can have up to 8 layers. Another thing I wanted to discuss is bringing the samples into the multi-sampler. Now, I mentioned that if you drag them down to this window, it will automatically start from C1 and put each sample on its own individual key. But I never mentioned putting multiple samples on the same key. And so that's one of the things I wanted to cover in this addendum. Now, the quickest way to do that is to open up your sampler to full screen like this, and then click on Create New Multi-Sample. Now, that's going to open up this page here. It's going to show your keyboard along the bottom. This is what I call the vertical view, and you also have the horizontal view with the keyboard at the top. Let's go ahead and focus on the vertical view, which is the default here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on one sample and then hold shift and click on the last sample. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like 8 samples. So I have 8 samples selected there. Now, as I was mentioning, if we drag these over, it's going to put a sample on each individual key. As I move my cursor up, it's going to eventually go so these samples occupy more than one key. All the way, if I go all the way to the top, then these samples will occupy all the keys on the keyboard. So as we go down, each sample is going to occupy its own individual key. But something I didn't talk about is if you go down even further onto this black strip that's between the edge of the sample and the keyboard, you'll see that now we are putting all 8 of these samples on the exact same key of the keyboard. And that's how to do it. Okay, just like that. Let's drop them there. And if we go to the horizontal, you can see there it is, all 8 samples on the same key. If you hit the key, ooh, that's noisy. Now, as far as doing that in the horizontal grid, I have not found any way to do that. The best use of the horizontal grid is if you drag these all the way to the names, then it covers all keys. Okay, so if you want to cover all the keys with the samples, you drag it to the names. If you want to put all the samples on a single key, switch to vertical mode and put them right in between the bottom of the sample window and the keyboard. That's how you do it. There you go. And again, you're not going to be able to see this until you switch to the actual horizontal mode. But what's powerful about this is when you can really start to randomize the round robin. Now, I had a comment here. Is it possible to randomize the round robin instead of playing one sample after another from top to bottom? Now, I had a couple of responses to that, and that's one of the reasons that I'm actually making this addendum video, is discussing, we never talked about putting multiple samples on the same key. What you can do is, with all these selected, you can right click and go distribute velocity equally. And what that's going to do is it's going to take all of these samples and put them on different velocity zones. And in doing that, if you hit the key very, very softly, you're going to get that first sample. The harder you hit the key, the further up. So now, obviously, if you put a clip in here and you loop this, So you can see as we play these MIDI notes, we're getting a different sample per note simply because we've made some adjustments, some chaos to the velocity. So with a lower velocity, we get the uppermost sample, and then with a high velocity, we get the lower sample here. And you can lay this out any way you want. You can rearrange these any way you want. But something I did want to mention is we could also use a random modulator to do this same thing. Let's go ahead and select all, and then we're going to reset this velocity layer. So top right, bottom left. And then instead of that, we're going to distribute select equally. Okay. If we go over to our select thing, we can see that. And then if we go to our sampler, and then we add a random generator under our modulators, let's go ahead and add random right there. And we modulate the select parameter. Okay. And let's go ahead and open this up, and we'll just kind of like max this out. 50 hertz sounds good. How about 50 kilohertz? That's even more wild. And then we play through this. So you can see we've put our velocity the same for every single note, and we're getting that actual round robin, random round robin based on the random modulator. So a different way to do it, but as you can see, we've put the velocity consistent with all the notes, but we're still getting that random generation with the random generator there. And what I do recommend is I recommend messing with some of these controls. You get more or less random results by messing with this modulator. You know, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. But that's another way to play them random. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the way that I answered that question is use a random modulator, or, you know, select your velocity and randomize your velocity. One more quick little thing is if you put a bunch of samples in here, maybe there's key tracking on some of them and not key tracking on the other ones. A good way to do that is just to select all these by lassoing or hitting Control A, and then go over to your key track and then adjust your key tracking. And once these are all selected, the adjustments that you make on the left of the screen are going to affect all the samples. For example, I went ahead and zeroed out the key tracking. So then once you select that and click 100%. Now you can lower your root key, and you can see the root key with the slash markers. You can get kind of a sense of different pitchings. And then, of course, if you don't want your key tracking to affect any of the samples, again, Control A, select them all, and take your key tracking to 0%. So this is a really quick way to affect all your samples at once. As long as they're selected, whatever you do in the left of the screen will affect all your samples. You know, same thing, we hit Control A. We can set up some loops, you know, set up some loops over here. So pretty much the sky's the limit. The idea is, though, to put multiple samples on the same key and then switch the samples on that same key. Now, a good example of this is I put together some hi-hat layering here, and you can kind of see what I did here. If we zoom down on this, you can see that I have hi-hats on here. And I have these set to velocity. So if we look at this horizontal, in a horizontal sense, you can see that there's different velocities going on. Basically, I created 4 velocity layers for each individual hi-hat. So if I hit it very soft, I get that first one. And as I hit it harder, you'll hear different velocity layers. I'm going to go ahead and play this real quick so you can hear it. So you can hear you're getting quite a bit of variation in there. And so, you know, you can do this with all your samples. You can come in here and instead of creating just one sample for one velocity, you can create multiple samples based on how hard you hit the key. So if you hit the key soft, you get this sample. If you hit the key hard, you get an entirely different sample. And I just noticed that under the Bitwig, under the library here, if you go to the samples and then you go to the Nectar acoustic drums, it's actually broken down into individual drum hits. And you'll notice that each one, like 1980 Yamaha 8000, for example, there's all your samples there. You'll see there's 4 of each sample. And that's why there's 4 of each sample, is there's different, different volumes. For example, let's go ahead and put a couple of these kick drums in. Let's say kick drum number 2. What you do is you click on the first one, you hold shift and click on the last one. Okay, so you see there's 4 samples I selected. We drag them over, and instead of just throwing them out on the keyboard here, what you want to do is put your cursor in between the keyboard and that top sample, and then you'll see all 4 of these samples are going to occupy the same key now. You drop it down, and it's automatically going to put all 4 of those samples on the same key. Now you want to right-click, and you want to go Distribute Velocity Equally. So if you hit it with a soft velocity, if you hit the key soft, you get the first sample. And as you go harder with the key, you get an entirely different sample. This is going to give you a really realistic feel to your drum sound because you're using actually 4 different samples based on the velocity you hit the key for a more human feel, if you will. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot you can do with randomizing, using velocity layers, also using select layers, but then using the random modulator randomly flip through the samples. Do remember, there's no way that I have found, and please comment below, there's no way that I have found any way to put more than 8 samples on a single key on your keyboard. So I guess that's good. I mean, I don't really sense that I'm going to need more than 8 samples on a single key on my keyboard. As far as layering goes, I've never layered something more than that many times anyway. I mean, if I'm going to do a layering, like if I'm going to layer my drums or something, I may use 2 or 3 samples at the most, maybe 4 if I'm going crazy. But yeah, there's no way that I have found to put more than 8 samples on an individual key of your keyboard. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I just basically wanted to address that question if there's a way to randomize the round robin, and that's the best way that I have found to do it. Also wanted to point out that shortcut of dragging multiple samples into the multi-sampler and putting them all on a single key. So I wanted to address those 2 subjects. So thanks again for those comments. Hopefully I answered your questions. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Comment below if you have any more questions about the multi-sampler, and I will try to address them and possibly even make a video explaining some of those concepts as far as, in this case, it was getting random samples to play on a single key. And this is the way I found to do it, the easiest way and the way that I'm probably going to do it if I need to randomize samples on a single key. All right, thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Remember, these videos are not for beginners or experts, they're for everybody. Thanks for watching, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys again. Bye-bye now.